happened today, and it did happen today. Breaking news out of Portland. The Ninth Circuit, breaking news about Portland, I should say. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has overturned Judge Immergut's order blocking the federalization of the National Guard, which means President Trump can. Am I right? Big deal?
It is a big deal. And I want to just correct one thing and then explain why functionally it is the same. This is a stay of Judge Immergut's opinion.
What just happened is absolutely seismic. A shattering moment that has sent shockwaves through the very foundations of American power and governance, leaving the nation reeling in disbelief as the Supreme Court delivered a late-night bombshell ruling that effectively collapses much of President Donald Trump's executive authority in one devastating blow. In a stunning 7-2 decision issued deep into the night, the justices struck down several of Trump's most sweeping executive powers, branding them as unconstitutional expansions that tear at the heart of the separation of powers, the bedrock principle that has kept our republic from descending into tyranny for more than 2 centuries. Analysts from every corner of the political spectrum are already calling this a constitutional neutron bomb, an explosion that doesn't topple buildings but obliterates the command structure inside them, rendering the executive branch's most aggressive maneuvers inoperable and sending ripples of uncertainty across the entire federal government. The unsigned opinion specifically invalidated Trump's directives that attempted to grant himself unilateral control over independent agencies and state National Guard units, actions that many legal scholars had warned were pushing the boundaries of presidential power to the breaking point and beyond, and in the immediate aftermath, this ruling froze dozens of White House orders in their tracks, creating what insiders are describing as administrative paralysis across multiple federal departments, a chaotic standstill where policies that had been aggressively pursued for months suddenly hang in limbo, their legal foundations crumbling beneath them. This is the biggest judicial check on a sitting president in over 50 years. A moment of historic reckoning that feels almost poetic in its irony because it came from a Supreme Court that includes 3 justices appointed by Trump himself during his first term, justices many believed would serve as reliable allies in expanding executive might. The decision didn't emerge from some partisan squabble or narrow ideological split. It was a clear, resounding rebuke that crossed party lines and ideological divides, forcing even those who might have been sympathetic to Trump's vision of strong leadership to draw a firm line in the sand. Imagine the scene in Washington as the news broke, aides in the White House scrambling for phones, legal teams huddled in emergency meetings, and across the country, Americans waking up to headlines that seemed almost too dramatic to be real, yet grounded in the unyielding text of the Constitution itself. The ruling didn't just trim a few edges off Trump's agenda, it dismantled the framework he had been building to transform the presidency into something far more centralized and unaccountable than anything seen in modern American history. When this matter is tried and it gets back to an appellate court through an ordinary process where they have full briefing and full evidence, that they still think Donald Trump is likely to prevail there, because he has the discretion to determine as the president. Those words echoed in the background of the legal battles leading up to this point, but now the Supreme Court has spoken with finality, and that presumption of unchecked discretion has been shattered like glass under a hammer. Let me break this all down for you because this is complicated, layered with centuries of constitutional precedent, yet incredibly important for every single American who cares about the balance of power in our democracy. Trump has been issuing executive orders throughout his second term that massively expand presidential authority in ways that go far beyond traditional interpretations of the office. He has claimed total authority over independent agencies that are supposed to be insulated from direct political control, agencies like the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, bodies designed to operate with a measure of expertise-driven independence to protect markets, consumers, and the public interest from the whims of any one administration. He has asserted the right to deploy state National Guard units for domestic law enforcement without the consent of those states' governors, a move that raises the specter of federal military forces being turned inward on American soil in ways that history has taught us to fear. He has tried to seize budgetary autonomy, control over federal hiring and firing that normally requires congressional approval, and even the power to override decisions made by these independent bodies whenever they conflicted with his priorities. Basically, Trump has been attempting to turn the presidency into an office with almost unlimited unilateral power, a vision where the executive branch operates more like a command center issuing decrees than a co-equal partner in a system of checks and balances. And the Supreme Court just said no in the strongest possible terms, a thunderous declaration that presidents do not possess total authority, that their powers are limited by the Constitution, constrained by Congress, and subject to judicial review. According to reporting from major outlets like Reuters and NPR, the justices ruled that Trump's delegation orders, which sought to grant himself total authority over independent commissions and military deployments, were unconstitutional expansions of executive power. Total authority, that was the language Trump himself used in those executive orders, words that carried the weight of absolute command. But the Supreme Court looked at that claim and declared in no uncertain terms, that is not how the Constitution works. Presidents do not have total authority. They have enumerated powers, carefully defined and deliberately limited to prevent any one person from becoming a monarch in all but name. The court's emergency order specifically halts Trump's use of state National Guard troops for domestic law enforcement operations, a flashpoint issue that had been simmering for months as states like Oregon and Illinois pushed back fiercely in lower courts, arguing that the president lacks the authority to seize control of their military forces without consent. Lower courts had already blocked some of these deployments, but now the Supreme Court has shut down the entire framework Trump was using to assert this power, a sweeping intervention that feels like the judicial branch stepping in at the 11th hour to restore order to a system teetering on the edge of overreach. In her concurrence, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, one of Trump's own appointees, wrote words that cut like a knife through the administration's arguments. No president may nullify Congress by decree. Think about that for a moment. A justice placed on the bench by Trump himself, chosen for her conservative credentials and expected to uphold strong executive prerogatives, now standing up to say that even the president he appointed cannot simply issue decrees that override the will of the people's elected representatives in Congress. That's huge, not just legally but symbolically, because it shows that even those who might philosophically align with certain aspects of Trump's agenda recognize that his claims of executive power have gone too far, threatening the constitutional order itself with their sheer scope and audacity. Chief Justice John Roberts went even further, warning in language that carries the gravity of centuries of precedent that unchecked authority strikes at the marrow of the Republic itself. The marrow of the Republic, those are incredibly strong words from the Chief Justice, a man not known for hyperbole or dramatic flourishes, but for careful, measured opinions that carry the weight of institutional stability. He's saying that Trump's power grabs aren't merely legally questionable or politically aggressive. They are existentially threatening to American democracy, the kind of moves that, if allowed to stand, would fundamentally alter our government from a system of checks and balances into something closer to executive dictatorship, where one person's will overrides the collective wisdom of the branches designed to restrain it. The practical impact of this ruling is immediate and severe, sending shockwaves through the White House and beyond, as officials privately told the Washington Post that it effectively suspends over 30 executive orders, 30 orders that had been the engines driving much of the administration's most ambitious initiatives. That includes directives on immigration enforcement, budgetary autonomy, and federal layoffs, all of them now invalid, their legal grounding ripped away in a single stroke. Federal agencies are being forced to return to pre-order structures by the end of the week, meaning policies that have been in effect for months are suddenly being unwound. Programs operating under Trump's expanded authority have to stop dead in their tracks, and the entire administrative apparatus that the president built to exercise unprecedented unilateral power is being dismantled by judicial order. Legal experts are calling this the judiciary's biggest check on a sitting president in over 50 years, drawing powerful parallels to United States v. Nixon in 1974, the landmark case that forced President Richard Nixon to release the Watergate tapes and ultimately contributed to his resignation. That was the Supreme Court telling a president that he is not above the law, that executive privilege has limits, and that no one, not even the most powerful person in the country, can shield themselves indefinitely from accountability. This ruling feels similar but potentially even more sweeping because it is not just about one specific controversy or set of tapes. It is about the fundamental scope of presidential power itself, with the court declaring that Trump has massively exceeded that scope in ways that endanger the Republic's core principles. The 7-2 vote is significant beyond measure. This was not a narrow 5-4 decision split along predictable ideological lines, but a broad consensus where 7 justices, including conservatives and Trump appointees, agreed that the president had gone too far. Only 2 justices dissented, A signal that the legal issues were so clear-cut that even those who might have wanted to give the administration the benefit of the doubt could not in good conscience support what was happening. When you lose 7-2 on questions of executive power, that is the court sending an unmistakable message that you have completely exceeded your authority, that the claims being made are not just aggressive but fundamentally incompatible with the Constitution's design. White House aides are privately acknowledging that this ruling has crippled much of the administration's internal authority, describing it in hushed tones as a constitutional ambush, language that reveals just how unexpected and devastating this was. Trump and his team apparently believed they could keep pushing the boundaries of presidential power, confident that the courts would ultimately defer or look the other way, but the Supreme Court has drawn a hard line in the sand, and now the entire governance model, which relied so heavily on unilateral executive action without congressional approval or judicial oversight, has been declared unconstitutional at its core. This is happening at the worst possible time for the president, as he is already navigating a storm of multiple scandals that have dominated headlines and eroded public trust, from the Canada trade disaster that disrupted economies and alliances to DOJ corruption investigations that have raised serious questions about the integrity of federal law enforcement, Kash Patel's perjury allegations that have cast shadows over key appointments, the backlash surrounding Adam Schiff's indictment that has fueled accusations of political weaponization, the controversy over the illegal White House demolition plans that seem to bypass normal oversight, and Melania's lawsuit that has added a deeply personal layer of distraction and drama to an already chaotic administration. Now, on top of all that, the Supreme Court has taken away many of the tools he has been using to exercise power, meaning he cannot simply issue executive orders to do whatever he wants anymore. He actually has to work within constitutional constraints, and that is going to severely limit what he can accomplish for the remainder of his term, forcing a reckoning with the realities of divided government and institutional guardrails that he has long sought to bypass. Here's what most people aren't fully grasping about this Supreme Court ruling, and I mean really aren't grasping even as the news cycles spin wildly. Everyone is focused on the immediate, dramatic impacts, the 30 executive orders suspended, the National Guard deployments halted, the administrative paralysis setting in like a fog over Washington, and all of that is critically important and undeniably dramatic. But the deeper significance lies in what this ruling says about the limits of presidential power and how fundamentally it rejects Trump's entire approach to governing. An approach that has treated the presidency as something akin to an elected dictatorship where winning the election grants nearly unlimited power to reshape the government in one's image. The Supreme Court just said that is completely wrong, that is not what the Constitution establishes, and that entire governance model is unconstitutional at its roots. Throughout his second term, Trump has issued executive orders claiming authority that presidents traditionally have not possessed, asserting control over independent agencies in ways that undermine their very purpose of providing impartial expertise and protection from political interference. These agencies were created precisely to insulate certain functions from the day-to-day pressures of electoral politics, to ensure decisions on everything from market regulations to consumer protections are made based on law and evidence rather than partisan demands. But Trump ordered them to report directly to him, to allow him to override their decisions, to operate under his total authority, a massive expansion that, if unchecked, would turn them into mere extensions of the White House, eroding public confidence in their independence and effectiveness. Trump also claimed the authority to federalize state National Guard units and deploy them domestically without state consent, a power grab that directly challenges the dual status of the Guard, which is normally under gubernatorial command unless federalized for specific, narrowly defined national emergencies or overseas operations. The Posse Comitatus Act, passed after the Civil War to prevent presidents from using the military as a domestic police force, stands as a bulwark against exactly this kind of overreach, a law born from the painful lessons of Reconstruction when federal troops were used to enforce order in ways that blurred the lines between military and civilian authority. Trump has been trying to bypass those restrictions, using Guard units for immigration enforcement, protest control, and other domestic operations, but the Supreme Court has now shut that down unequivocally, declaring that such assertions violate both constitutional principles and federal law. The separation of powers issues at play here are fundamental to the American experiment itself. The Constitution deliberately divides authority among three co-equal branches. Congress makes the laws. the president executes them, and the courts interpret them, each checking the others to ensure no single branch becomes dominant. That system only functions when every branch respects its boundaries, and Trump has been consistently violating that framework, claiming he can ignore congressional legislation he dislikes, asserting powers that require legislative authorization without seeking it, defying court orders and subpoenas, and treating the other branches as obstacles to be steamrolled rather than partners in governance. The Supreme Court has now said that is unconstitutional, that the president does not get to decide unilaterally how much power he possesses. The Constitution decides, and in this case, Trump has exceeded what it allows. Justice Barrett's concurrence carries particular weight because she is a Trump appointee, a conservative justice who has generally favored a robust view of executive authority in other contexts. Yet even she looked at the specifics of what was happening and concluded it was too much, too extreme, a bridge too far that no president, regardless of party or ideology, should be permitted to cross. Her statement that no president may nullify Congress by decree is a direct, unflinching rebuke of the governance style that has defined much of this administration, because that is precisely what Trump has been attempting, issuing executive orders that effectively override laws passed by Congress on how agencies should operate or what military deployments are authorized. Barrett is reminding everyone that executive orders cannot supersede congressional legislation, that presidents must work within the legal framework established by the people's representatives, a basic tenet of separation of powers that apparently required explicit reaffirmation by the highest court in the land. Chief Justice Roberts' warning about unchecked authority striking at the marrow of the republic is even more alarming, coming from a figure known for his institutional caution and aversion to dramatic language. When he chooses words like that, he is expressing genuine alarm at the trajectory, warning that what Trump has been pursuing is not just legally flawed but poses a genuine threat to the survival of constitutional democracy. If presidents can claim unlimited power without effective checks, then we no longer have a republic, we have an autocracy dressed in democratic clothing.